Hello everyone, I'm Aaron and welcome back to the Class Horrorcast. Again, another little mini episode for everybody, just to kind of keep things going, keep things different, active. I just want to talk about a franchise that I love, and we're going to talk about some planned but unmade sequels for this, and it's the Leprechaun franchise. So, to me, the Leprechaun franchise is like fascinating in a way, because you have the likes of Child's Play, Halloween, different ones. They've all got weird twists and turns, but I don't think any of them have taken so many turns with such regularity as Halloween has, or as Leprechaun has, sorry. It's bizarre because it isn't even really a franchise in a way. It's more like an anthology. There's been no real direct sequels, other than the fact that Warwick Davis plays the villain, and none of them really have any continuity from one to the next. I mean, Leprechaun Back to the Hood isn't even a sequel to Leprechaun in the Hood, which is kind of creative in a way, and I suppose it's quite freeing for an independent horror series. I mean, all it takes to make a Leprechaun film is think of a setting or scenario that would be infinitely funnier and better with a leprechaun added to it, and then just kind of go from there. Okay, so we're going to take a look at some of the proposed sequels, or not sequels, additions to the name or the franchise that never got greenlit, or maybe did and never actually came to fruition. So the first one we have here is Leprechaun in the White House. So, when Brian Trenchard Smith's Leprechaun 3 was released, it was the most successful straight-to-video horror film of 1995, and it remains a fan favourite even till now. Because of that, he went right on to direct Leprechaun 4 in space. Despite that 1-2 punch, he never directed another Leprechaun entry, though it wasn't for lack of trying. He did have a pitch for Leprechaun 5. As it turned out, and his idea would have been finding Leprechaun in the White House. As the director noted, his version would have seen the little imp infiltrating an oafish but well-meaning first family. This was, after all, the Clinton era, and Trenchard Smith was a fan of the president at the time. While the timing was far from perfect, a chance for satire, as it would have been during the Bush years, or say now, Leprechaun in the White House had a lot of potential just based on the concept alone. Unfortunately, Trimark thought it was too out there, which is kind of flabbergasting considering that it was coming off the heels of Leprechaun in space. And it's also not the only franchise that didn't try and have an entry in their franchise in the White House. Stuart Gordon apparently wanted to bring Herbert West to the White House in a house of the Reanimator, I think it was, which also obviously never happened. From here, we're going to jump into one that's probably the most talked about one out of all of these, and that is Candyman versus Leprechaun. So, Candyman is one of the best films of the 1990s. It might even be the best. Leprechaun, for all its charm, is not. Other than supernatural central characters with vaguely defined powers, these two franchises have absolutely nothing to do with one another. They're completely different on a tonal and stylistic level. It seems absurd and impossible that this crossover would actually have ever been considered, but it was, at least briefly apparently. Tony Todd has famously said that in the slow period after Candyman 3, that saw us bereft of any Candyman film until the new reboot that's coming out, the studio pitched him an idea of a crossover with the Leprechaun franchise on the heels of Freddy vs. Jason. But he immediately turned it down apparently. Obviously there have to be a few things considered with this head scratching matchup. This is just in my opinion. What would Candyman want with Leprechaun's gold for a start? Or if that was going to be the storyline. Would whoever stole the gold somehow be something to do with Candyman? Or maybe a victim of Candyman, and then they would kind of cross paths? What about the height difference? Now, I think that wouldn't have been as big of a problem. It would have been kind of funny, but I can see where Tony Todd is coming from, and it would have really cheapened the Candyman aspect. And I don't mean this in the sense that Leprechaun is like a cheap franchise. It is to a degree, but like I think the character is fantastic, and they really built something out of nothing there, I think. And it's a pity that it doesn't get a proper look in. Leprechaun Returns was quite good, I thought. But I mean, Leprechaun has kind of solidified himself up there. But I can see why Tony Todd felt like Candyman can't really cross over with a funny wisecracking character, because it just wouldn't work, because there's like the tone, there are two completely different things. But in saying that, I'm very surprised that he had that much pull. You know, and if they really wanted to do it, I'm assuming they would have just recast him and just moved on. But yeah, that would have been interesting. It would have been just fun to see from the spectacle point of view, but it probably would have been god awful. This is one that I didn't actually know about until recently, and honestly actually sounds like not a half bad idea. So it's Leprechaun in the Old West. So this idea I think is frankly genius, and I'm actually a little bit annoyed that this never became a thing. So apparently after In the Hood and Back to the Hood, a few years had passed before there was any serious talk of another Leprechaun movie. When the idea finally came, it came from none other than Darren Lynn Bousman, who was coming off the success of Saw 2, 3 and 4 at the time. His idea was to do a period piece, taking the Leprechaun back to the Old West and in the days of the Californian Gold Rush. While it seems simple, and yet it's so obvious, it's still amazing that nobody ever jumped on this, even after him. Now maybe, with the kind of little bit of success of Returns, it might reignite things. The idea of the Leprechaun taking an old-timey gold miner's gold is just too good to waste, in my opinion. In terms of a creator coming off a huge success to tackle an oddball franchise, it's just... I'm very surprised that when I heard his name mentioned for this pitch, I was actually extremely surprised, and part of me still kind of doesn't believe it. But I would have loved to have seen him bring that to fruition, but I mean, I guess that's not going to happen now, but maybe somebody else will take that idea and kind of work off of that. Apparently Warwick Davis also had his own Leprechaun pitch. So for many, it was bittersweet going into the new Leprechaun without Warwick Davis, as he had defined a role for so many years, among the likes of Robert Englund with Freddy Krueger, Doug Bradley with Pinhead, Tony Todd with Candyman, and the list goes on. There was a time when he was like completely invested in this character, and even when he was in huge things like Harry Potter. But after Back to the Hood, he had his own ideas where the franchise should head. And at one point, I think he might have actually sat down with the studio and pitched an idea that the next movie would introduce us to Leprechaun's whole family. So it would be like a wife, kids, maybe his parents. It would have been, I don't know, hilarious, but not great. I honestly don't think that would have been good. And maybe people will disagree, and I know a lot of these movies aren't good, but that sounds awful to me. But it would have shed some new light on Leprechaun 2, which is obviously the one where Leprechaun attempts to have a bride, and yeah, I'm not sure. I want to move on from that one. That just sounds awful. And this is the second last one we're moving on to right here. This one is one that I would have been super excited about, which is Leprechaun versus Wishmaster. So I'm not sure if this was in serious consideration or not, but the idea first spread around after a trailer appeared online. I think it was a fan trailer that used clips from both the franchises, and it's obviously commonplace, and this happens a lot, and it's not an indicator that anything was actually officially happening. But there was a rumour going around at one point when this came out that somebody had cut the trailer as a pitch, like as a sizzle reel for Lionsgate. And I mean, the trailer I think at the time appeared on like Fangoria's website and Into Cool News and a couple of other places, which feels like there's a little bit more weight to it then. And the other thing that gives it a little bit of credibility is I checked this up, and actually I think at the time this happened, both franchises were under the same umbrella. While it didn't really make any sense to do something like maybe Candyman and Leprechaun, I do feel like tonally and stylistically, Leprechaun versus Wishmaster would have worked. Like I said, they both had similar tones and styles. I would imagine their budgets were kind of similar. They were a bit schlocky, both of them. And a crossover between the two of these would have actually had a lot of potential, I think, and would have been very entertaining to watch. We might have even gotten a second one. And I'm going to post the trailer on my Instagram page. So if you go onto Instagram and search First Class Horror, have a look through my posts there, and I'm going to have that sizzle reel posted on my Instagram, so you can check that out there and comment underneath and let me know what you think of it. I actually personally love it, and I kind of wish we'd see more things like that come out. But so moving on, then we're moving on to the last one here, which is Vampiricon, which is, again, I feel like only the Leprechaun franchise could have such bizarre names and things like that attached to it, which is kind of why I love it, to be honest. Okay, so it's not technically a Leprechaun movie, but it's about a killer leprechaun, and it's from the original writer and director Mark Jones. He wanted Warwick Davis to reprise his role. It wouldn't have had anything to do with the previous Leprechaun movies, but in fairness, they never had anything to do with each other anyway. So the central concept is brutally simple, and it's exactly what the title is, basically. It's about a leprechaun that's also a vampire. For me, just the image of Davis playing the leprechaun again, but he has a cape and he's drinking blood and stuff, before he's attacking victims in between having, his jokes and one-liners. I love it. I love the idea. But I think this one, out of all the ones I've mentioned, this is the one that came the closest, I think. I've done some research on this, and apparently Mark Jones was dead set on making Vampiricon, and he even checked with an attorney. I think he hired somebody, an attorney or a lawyer, to start up this project, and this guy also helped him raise funding for the film, and to make sure there'd be no legal troubles from the owners of the Leprechaun franchise, because obviously Mark Jones does not own it. But this was all stopped dead in its tracks when there was a lawsuit put in by Mark Jones against his attorney, because apparently he wasn't a practicing or real attorney at the time, and the entire project fell apart, and it's just never been rekindled again. I'm not sure whether it just soured his feelings towards the whole thing, and it was just more hassle than it was worth. But that would have been another fun one. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know if we should be trying to reinvent the wheel with Leprechaun, or just treat it for what it is, and let's make things like Leprechaun versus Wishmaster, Vampiricon, all those kinds of things. I don't know. Part of me did want to see it reimagined and make it serious, but I mean, the whole folklore and mythology behind the Leprechaun has always been, it can be scary, but it's always been, it's always been that kind of wisecracking, they're clever and sneaky and smart. Maybe a little bit of mystery and scariness in there, but I personally didn't like the WWE version at all. And I thought I was going to like the fact that it was a super serious tone, but I personally just didn't like it at all. But let me know what you guys think, what crossovers you would have liked to have seen out of those ones, and also what crossovers you'd like to see out of any franchises or characters, really, within the horror world, obviously. Once again, I appreciate everybody for listening, for all the likes, shares, reviews, subscribes, everything. It all helps me greatly. You can check out everything I'm doing over at www.classhorrorcast.com, and you can support me on Patreon now as well. Just patreon.com/firstclasshorror. I have a Patreon set up now, and I've also got merch on Teespring. So if you go into teespring.com/firstclasshorror, or you can go to my Instagram, and I have a central link there which will take you to anywhere you want to go. And as always, I hope everyone's doing well. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you do have any feedback or suggestions for future content, hit me up on Instagram. Is probably the best place, and I'll talk to you guys very soon. Bye bye.